Hello, and welcome to the Santa Land Podcast. I created it just for you. I'm your host, Tony Felice. In each episode, I'll read to you for 10 minutes, and then we'll talk about what we just heard. Like the cricket in my story, I'll guide you through a grown-up fairy tale, one that explores ideas of existence, identity, and the soul's journey through trauma, and the transformative power of love. By the end, you'll have heard my whole story, a sneak peek into the creative process of bringing a book to life. Maybe we'll read other books together. But for now, follow the wise cricket and discover the Santa Land within yourself, a place of hope, connection, and peace that's already inside of you. This podcast is especially made for those like me who feel a little different and maybe talk about math at weddings or philosophy at funerals. And like me, maybe you have a loving husband, or a wife, or somebody else that loves you. If not, we're here to love you, because you're in good company, my dear friends, here in Santa Land. Welcome to the Santa Land Podcast, and thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for this journey that you've gone on with me. We are up to chapter 40, and there are only about 7 more chapters left for the rest of the book. I will tell you that the remaining chapters of the first part of this book are intense, so this is a warning to be careful, and I'll put a note on the upcoming episodes as well. But we are about to move into the fairy tale very, very soon here, probably next week, maybe the week following. So in any event, without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 40, entitled The Bohemian Trove. Kellie knocked on the door softly. She had hoped that David had seen her text, but she was greeted by a locked door. She peered inside the window next to the door. No one. The kitchen window next. Light, but no activity. She thought to herself, "Shit, I don't want to make an entrance with Meredith already here. What do I do?" "Well, Toots, here we go." She pressed the doorbell. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding. Westminster Abbey in electronic chime. Something was off. Kellie could sense it. She would look to David before saying anything. Within seconds, she could hear feet rushing towards her, barefoot on wood floor to be precise. She loved her ears and their ability to hear bionically. It was one of her best abilities. She could hear, quote, bullshit from a mile away, end quote. The door opened to a rush of smell from flowers, wood, beef stew, and the sea. What a grand entrance. "My God, Kellie, I'm so glad to see you," Kellie said, rushing towards her after opening the door to simultaneously take her bag and hug her. When he did so, the straps of her bag slipped and entangled them in time for Tom to emerge from the lighted doorway. "Hello, Toots. What brings you to these parts?" He laughed and rushed forward to hug her and David simultaneously. "Yay, Kellie is here," Tom said with absolute abandon. Perhaps a bit too much for Meredith to see, David thought silently. "Here, hang on. Okay, David said as they danced a tango of tangled bags. "Hold on," said Tom. I think I can grab this one off her arm. I got it." All 3 of them laughed the way they used to back in the early days. Sometimes young age creeps up on old age. So they stood there, basking in the light of the portico, and they time-traveled. From a distance, they looked like 3 old friends. That's exactly what they were. Gray in their hair, juxtaposed against the youth of their memory. It was a balmy night, one last Indian summer before the cold of winter. Summer, clinging like Mama clings to a college-bound freshman, wanting to let go, but finding it so hard. "Come on in, Meredith is here." "This is a first." David eyed Kellie the way Tom imagined Bond eyed Moneypenny when M or Q said something that was a double entendre that M and Q missed, but Bond and Penny caught. David and his secrets, Tom thought. What are he and Kellie up to? But then the moment had passed, in a rush of setting down bags, tasting the stew, choosing a wine, and mostly burning time, until they would all be in the room at the same time. Finally, Tom excused himself to return to Meredith, while David and Kellie opened another bottle. "So, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we, Toots?" said Kellie. DEFCON 3, replied David. She gave a little murmur to let him know that she understood. Better not leave Tom too long, David urged. Rosie's lurking about. She'll get your bags. We're putting you in the cottage, so you'll have a safe retreat. That good, huh? Kellie asked. She thought they wouldn't put her in one of the cottages if they didn't have a good reason. That was fine. She liked the little garden outside the cottage. Together, her and David made their way down the hallway, the sound of sea and laughter announcing the way. They walked into the great room. "Ah, Kellie," said Tom, and he jumped from his seat. "Don't get up, Toots. You look comfy," said Kellie, turning to Meredith. "Hi, Meredith. So, this is it." You're prettier than I thought," said Meredith. "You dress like a hippie, though. So does Bitsy. I don't know why everybody wants to look like a gypsy lately." "Meredith, we don't use that word anymore," said David. "Oh, pooh," Meredith replied. "There aren't any real gypsies anymore, anyway. They got internet and running water. These new people are just posers." Well, hello to you, Meredith. I've never been greeted by a spider so eloquently before," said Kellie. Dead silence. "I couldn't help it," Kellie added, referring to her skirt and flapping it a bit. "Try being a professor with all those lesbians at Berkeley, and you'll understand why I enjoy a bit of Paisley. Nobody expects a black hippie, do they?" Meredith ignored the last part and turned rudely to Tom. "Well, this spider lady needs a refill," in a tone that said she knew exactly what Kellie meant. But before she could reach, Kellie laughed and ran across the room towards Meredith. "Come on, Mer, give this old girl a hug." And she nearly dragged Meredith out of her seat to throw an arm around her and to bury her face into her bosom. Tom stared as if Jupiter had pulled Saturn into its orbit and was slowly chewing it to pieces. Meredith stood and allowed herself to be hugged. That's how David would describe it later, afterwards. Kellie flounced into a chair, kicked off her shoes, and sat cross-legged. "So, what are we talking about?" she said, winking at David. Meredith and I were just talking about when we all lived in New York back in the day," Tom replied. "Right. I'm surprised we never met," said Kellie breezily, knowing full well that it would have been more likely for her to flip a coin and have it land on the edge than to run into Meredith in Manhattan. While Meredith orbited in more, quote, rigorous society, Kellie tended towards more bohemian pursuits, speakeasies over Met Gala. "Well, you know, we both travel in different circles," replied Meredith, just shy of a withering tone. You and my parents, I swear y'all love the galas," replied Kellie. Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Anyone need anything?" The temptation to leave the room and listen from the hallway was tugging at his mind's sleeve, but he stayed there. "David told me that you're staying in one of the cottages," replied Meredith. "Well, won't that be nice for everyone?" said Meredith. Oh, yes, I love me a garden," said Kellie, the word love drawn out for effect. "We gypsies, we have a long history with flowers." Chirp. Okay, that's chapter 40. One thing I haven't talked about is that I broke the book down into seasons, as you may have noticed. But I've also broken it down into, believe it or not, acts of contrition. I know that sounds crazy, but I kind of like that. Kind of like what, if you don't know what that means, it just basically means to come in humility and ask for forgiveness. So there's atonement, contrition, thanksgiving, and supplication. So in each chapter, for example, in the first chapter, he atones for the sins of the prior time period. And then in the next chapter, he is contrite, and he explains all the reasons why he is contrite, or the character is. The next chapter, or section is about thanksgiving. It's about appreciating everything that they have. And then the last chapter is about supplication, which we're in right now. And we'll find out why that is so powerful. I've also broken each of these chapters is broken down into very small bite-sized pieces so that you can read them by themselves. And hopefully the title is clever, and then the last line is clever. And hopefully that individual chapter is wrapped up in a nice little bow. I also wanted to share a couple other things with you about how I develop a character. So some of these characters, while they are based on people, there's a little bit more structure involved in that. So when I set out with a new character, I just brainstorm and I just write anything that comes to my mind. I just write it out. And then I start looking at some categories, right? The basic information, how old they are, what their name is, what race they are, what gender they are, their physical appearance. Do they have, but more specific than she had red hair, right? She had the kind of red hair that looked like copper, sun off copper, right? That kind of fiery red. A little bit more descriptive about than just red. And then I look at the voice and their dialogue, like what are the speech patterns that they have? What's their style? Like how do they communicate? Some people speak in riddles. Some people tell you, but you can tell they tell you something, but you can tell there's full of meaning between the lines, right? Some people are very direct. Some people can come off as rude at first, but they have a tender heart. Then I look at their background and their history, with their family and where they're from, and some personality traits. I might define their relationships, or what is it they're trying to do in the world, or what kind of conflicts have they overcome. And then what is their development arc? How are they going to grow or transform over this journey? So those are the things that most writers take into consideration, those 8 sections as a template. So basic information, physical appearance, voice and dialogue, background and history, personality and traits, relationships, goals and conflicts, and then their development arc. With Kellie, in this chapter, we've learned that David locked the door on purpose because he wants to go greet Kellie. He didn't want her to walk in on anything heated. So he would be happy for the interruption if it got heated. Kellie knows David well enough to know that if the door was locked, that it's a signal for her. And so she just takes a second, and before she moves forward, collects herself. She even asked David, after the greeting, where are we at here? He says DEFCON 3. So he's setting the tone here. Also, this is the first time that Kellie and Meredith have met. So what's going on in Meredith's mind? She thinks she's going to lose Tom, perhaps. David's being annoying and out of control. She's never met Kellie before. She doesn't like people that she thinks are beneath her. Little does she know that Kellie's resume is probably better than hers. And so Kellie is also accidentally there as a buffer, but we'll find out the critical reason why she's there here shortly. If it's helpful, you can choose someone in your life or someone you know to be the foundation for that character, but you might want to make that character a little bit more rounded in a different way by adding some of those things, maybe character traits, or change the backstory. But I always start with someone familiar to me, because that way I can capture some of the way of speaking, the turn of phrases that person may have. That's helpful to me. Anyway, I think we're going to end that here at around 13 or 14 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, because we're going to be getting into some heavier things here. So, love you guys. Thank you so much for listening to the Santa Land Podcast. Episodes come out weekly on all your favorite podcast platforms. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful night.